like the sound of that. All right, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Conversations Under the Influence. I'm your host, Natallia, and today I'm very excited to introduce you to Jon Carlo. He's my homie from our serving days, and the dope thing about him is he is not only one of your typical, don't hate me, washed up actors, but you actually did something about it in the sense of like, you came out here, you were born in Toronto, but lived in Argentina and Israel and some other spots, came down here to live the dream. It wasn't working. And what I loved about you is I remember meeting you. You worked at this restaurant called Gusto for anyone that knows about it.
R.I.P. Gusto.
Hey, lots of restaurants now, right? But you really were like taking a hold and transition. I remember like you were just like, I'm gonna do this writing thing, and it's beautiful because you fucking wrote a script, and not only did you actually write a script, it got made, and then you got another one made, and then all of a sudden you wrote one and then got one directed in what, a short period of time, in the sense of like what, 2 years?
It was over the span of probably like 2.5 years. It just kind of like did a complete 180 from like being, from like I quit the restaurant business and then, had a little bit of success, right? But then had like some success in like acting and all this stuff. And then like most actors know it's either like feast or famine. One day you're like killing it, next day you're fucked. Yeah. And so, after being away for like a year, I had to go back to the service industry. And I went back just as I like got my first writing job, and that movie got made. And so when I got hired, when I met you working at Gusto, it was like literally like 2 months after we finished shooting the first movie that I wrote. And so I'm like thinking, I'm on set of this movie that I wrote. Harvey Keitel's in the movie. I'm acting with Harvey Keitel. It's like my script. And then 2 months later, I'm back in the restaurant. I'm like,
people have no idea how crazy mindfuck that stuff is.
And what's even crazier was when we were working together at Gusto. So the movie was done, but it hadn't come out yet. So, about 6 months into us working together, the movie comes out. And so I'm waiting table with you. There's a massive billboard on Sunset Boulevard of my movie with my face on the fucking billboard. And some friends of mine come into the restaurant and they're like, Jon? And I'm like, can I get you a bottle of wine? Would you like some extra Parmesan on your bread? Like, dude, I just saw your face on fucking Sunset Boulevard. What are you doing waiting table? But that's the life. It's like the whole thing is, it's like, very few artists, I think, are honest enough to admit that even though you have success on Facebook and Instagram, you're still hustling. You still have to hustle. And that means bartending, waiting tables, walking dogs, doing whatever. And it's like, I feel like what your podcast is doing, which is so important, is it's showing the artists and the hustlers that it's like, don't believe the hype. Like, just because you have 8 different gigs and you're still pursuing your dream doesn't mean you haven't made it, or you're not going to. You're doing exactly what everyone else is doing, except the top 0.5% who are actually making a living completely with their art. And that takes time. I've been doing this 15 years, and only in the last 2 has there been success, or like a little bit of success.
Thank you for sharing that, because people think it's like this overnight thing, because people don't hear the grind, right? They just see the pop off. And like, I've had so many people, like both friends and family and with love, but being like, how long is this going to take? Shouldn't you go find something else? I'm like, bitch, I'm way ahead of the game, actually. Like, the things I've done are way ahead of what a lot of people are done. And like the people that have like popped off, like, I'm on that track. So it's just like you said, though, like, you have to like take control, like I originally came out here wanting to do, like, my dream job was like Wild On, to do like a travel adventure show. And like, for whatever reason, that wasn't it. But I still had a lot of things to say to the world. And so like, transitioning to writing a book and then having a podcast and still being able to get my message out there. And now I'm shooting and editing my own travel adventure show that, who knows, maybe Netflix will directly.
Right.
Who knows? Netflix, where are you?
If you're listening.
Actually, my next co-hosts are 2 people that I went to college with. And during this COVID thing, I've been watching endless amounts of like shit on Hulu and Netflix, and I'm out of everything that I normally want to watch. And I stumbled upon the Umbrella Academy, and I was like,
amazing. Yeah.
oh, the guys that produced and wrote it are my homies from college.
That's
I should actually introduce you guys. But it was just so funny. They've been out here for 15 years, and like it's been like boom, you know. So like it's you've got to really be in it for the right reasons, you know. Like there's a lot of like these Insta celebrities, whether they're the reality TV shows or like the social media influencers,
YouTubers,
and good for them for getting it while they can. But I think like in terms of having like a long-term career, it's like the ones that the growth that it's slow. But you know, so why don't you? How did you even score your first writing gig?
I mean, it came out of like necessity. Like, you know, I moved to LA to be an actor, and I auditioned 1,000 times, and like I booked small roles on Parks and Recreation and small roles on Transparent, and like a million commercials, and I'm doing like industrials, and you know, I was always going out for the same thing, like, you know, cop number 3 or waiter number 4. Like all the auditions I had, my characters never had fucking names, and I'm like what's a guy like you? In order to get like a guest star, you got to book a co-star. In order to book it's like it's this ladder that the first 10 steps are just missing. So it's like, how do you climb the ladder if you can't even get on the ladder to begin with? And so I was like, you know what, if I teach myself how to write, because I never went to school for writing, I didn't know anything about writing scripts, but I'm just hard-headed and stubborn. So I'm like, you know what, fuck this. Like, if they can do it, why not me? And so I was like, if I can learn to write a script, I can write myself a role in the movie.
Hey!
So, you know what I mean? And it all came from that. Like, I never wanted to be a writer. I was like, I came here to be an actor, and that's what I'm going to do. And so, you know, I wrote like my first script. And LA is one of those cities that it's true what they say, where it's like, it's not all about what you know, it's also who you know. And I happen to be a good networker, and I knew a lot of people. And, you know, my roommate at the time had a meeting with this guy who is Israeli. And he was like the biggest nightlife promoter in New York City. If you went to a nightclub between 1990 and 2015, it was one of his clubs. And, you know, he decided to, you know, start making movies, and he had like this multi-million-dollar film fund. And so my roommate was going to meet with him for something completely different. And I'm in my head, I'm like, this guy's Israeli, I'm Israeli. And I wrote a script about Israeli soldiers suffering from PTSD. And I was like, to my roommate, I'm like, listen, dude, if you have the opportunity, no pressure, just maybe mention my script. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I don't want you to like take away from your meeting. But if it's right, just, you know, drop it. And so he did, and the guy was like, what? Oh, Israeli? I want to read it. Connect me with this guy. I want to read it. And so my roommate came back. He's like, bro, the guy wants to read your script. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I sent him the script. A couple of days later, I get an email back. He's like, Jon, I read your script. Hated it. Not my kind of movie. Have no interest in making it. Like, it's kind of shitty. But, yeah, exactly. And then he's like, but I like your writing. And so I have an idea for a movie. And, you know, since you know, the movie's about Israeli gangsters in New York, and you're Israeli, you speak the language, he wants to star in the movie. So he's like, I want you to write the script for me. I'm like, okay. He's like, but there's not much money. It's a low budget movie. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'll pay you 10 grand. I'm like, 10 grand? Like, what? Like, I'm not even a fucking writer. Sure. Yeah. So I, you know, took the job. And, you know, over the course of like 6 months, wrote the script kind of with him, for him.
Which I remember because you never cover any of my shifts, fucker.
Correct. I was like, sorry, gotta write. And then, so I finished the script and sent it to him. He's like, great, I love it. We're shooting in 2 months. I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, I greenlight my own movies. Like, I have my own film fund. We're shooting your script. And I was like, holy shit. And that never really happens, but it happens. And so when people tell you these fucking Cinderella stories, you know,
cheers. Cheers to that.
Yes, ma'am. And then that came out, and that's when I was working at Gusto, and that's the billboard that was on Sunset. And then after that, he wanted to do another movie. And then after that second movie, you know, I was approached to write and direct my first feature, which is coming out very soon. It's called Feral.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. And for all you guys, I'll drop a link, but you also got featured in Vanity Fair for that, correct?
For the second script I wrote. So the second script was a mafia movie based on true events. And it starred David Arquette, Jennifer Esposito, Jamie Lynn Sigler. I had a great scene in the movie as well, because I always write myself a role in my movies.
As you should.
Of course. And so, like, after the movie came out, they sold it. And then after, like, about a year, it got onto, like, Showtime. So then, like, everyone was like, oh, my God, your movie's on Showtime. And out of the blue, Vanity Fair contacts me and say, hey, Jon, we're doing this, like, series on true crime. And we want to do a piece, not about your movie, but about the history behind your movie. And they're like, but it's COVID, so you can't do it in the studio. Would you be up for filming it yourself? Like, bitch, I'm a filmmaker. So my friends over, 2 cameras, lit it, everything, and we shot this thing, and it's now live on Vanity Fair. It's got like 10, 20,000 views. Well, and just another notch for the resume. You know what I mean? And that's all it is. And, you know, still, it's like, you know, I'm not living large. I'm still like, you know, unemployment check to unemployment check. But, you know, it's all about, I think, perseverance and never giving up and just being okay with, you know, like the long-term goal. So many people, I think, are interested in like immediate instant gratification, you know? And if you post a video online and you only get 400 views, like, oh, suck. But like, you have to do that 1,000 times. You have to post hundreds of videos. You have to write hundreds of scripts. You have to, like, you know, I'm sure you had so many drafts of your first book that you wrote. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the first draft, you're like, this doesn't feel like a book. But, you know, they say writing is all about rewriting. You know, the first draft is a fucking blueprint.
If that.
If that. But like, you just got to keep going. And that's the thing.
It just was like.
Right? Toilet paper. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, I think a lot of people get discouraged because we live in a culture of like instant gratification. Yeah. And it's a fucking marathon. It's not a race. It's not a sprint. And if your goal in life is to be famous, then, you know, take a picture or take a video of licking toilet seats and maybe you'll go viral. But if your goal is to be an artist, and then you have to do your art. Yeah. And that 90% of it is when no one's watching or no one's reading your shit. It's what you do when you're home by yourself and to develop a craft, whatever the craft may be. It takes time. It takes fucking 10,000 hours.
I know. You said so much good shit.
Sorry if I'm blabbering. Like, stop me.
No, it's okay. Blabbering is good when you actually are blabbering about something we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, just, like,
right.
Can't.
Cut.
No, going about the like, so like the longevity of things, and like it was cool, like with the COVID for me, because in my head, even a year ago, I really had this vision of like I wanted to do flyers for both my book and my podcast around LA, like guerrilla marketing with like scan codes. Because one of the problem is with like my algorithms is sometimes it's hard to find. So I'm like, well, scan codes, you can find it right away. And P.S. my flyers have gotten taken down almost immediately, and all the places are because everyone's a bunch of unhappy vaginas. But the places I didn't expect, dude, I flyered the shit out of like my neighborhood, Fairfax district. It made it through the fucking riots. They were still up. Apparently, I was even in the news when they were, and I'm like, hey.
That's amazing. Great publicity.
But you know what? It really reminded me the importance of also though having short-term goals and long-term goals. So like, you know, these flyers were this instant gratification that kept some of these other things that I've been working on. I'm still working on this program called Unfucking Yourself, like the intro. A year later, it's finally almost done. This whole thought was gonna be done in 3 months, maybe 5. So it's like, it's easy to give up. So I think it's so important to have other things, you know, even if it's like weight loss, or if you're, you know, trying to start something new that you have an idea, you just have to like make one goal, you know, that is easily attainable, and then stretch goals. And people, I think, get how important both of them are. Like this feeds that, you know?
Right. I mean, you nailed it right on the head, because it's like, if you don't have those two separate goals, like if you don't have the long term and the short term, so the long term goal is what, like, you know, keeps you going.
Mm-hmm.
But without a short term goal, the long term goal seems so daunting that you won't start anything. So if your goal, like let's say your goal is, I want to write a novel, and if that's your only goal, then you sit down at your computer and you have a blank page and you're like, I have 0 pages. And the thought of having a novel is so daunting that people will procrastinate, will clean their apartment, will jerk off on Pornhub, will do everything and anything they can to avoid starting, because the uphill is so steep. Whereas you have your long term, which is like novel, but your short term is 3 pages, or not even 1 page. Because once you start that, if your goal is to write 1 page, by the time you're done, you're already in the zone. So maybe you'll do 2 or 3 or 5.
Exactly.
But it's a more manageable goal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think
you're so right about it.
Because, like, for instance, like, I would think also too, starting, like physically starting whatever that is, for me personally, I've gotten better now. I'm like, whatever. But before, starting was the hardest part, because it was scary, because you had to be honest of like, okay, am I really gonna do this? And if you say you're gonna do this and don't, then people are afraid that they're gonna fail or not like live up to the expectation. So I think this also circulates back to like you talking about like success and longevity. It's also super important about like checking your fucking circle, regardless of whatever it is. If you just like are a stay-at-home mom, like with raising good kids, and that's your goal, like check your circle, because a lot of these other women are cranky ass fucking bitches and unhappy married, trying to give you advice on how you raise your kid, whatever. So it's like, you know, going back to like being an artist, again, like when it gets hard, like you need your people to be your cheerleaders, you know.
100%. And yeah, having like a inspirational group around you, it kind of like, you know, keeps you going. There's a couple books that I read that really changed the whole game for me. The biggest one, like the biggest like game changer, like fucking Matrix, blue pill, like changed everything, was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Okay.
Are you familiar with it? So it's like, it's geared towards writers.
Okay.
But you can easily like substitute writer for anything, whether it's entrepreneur, furniture builder, whatever. And like the whole concept is that human beings have this innate thing within us all called resistance. And it's that little voice in your head that tells you when you're about to sit down, don't do it, this sucks. You have like it's the voice that stops you from starting.
Yeah.
And so what Stephen Pressfield talks about in that book is that you have to create like a routine, a rhythm. And he's like, you know, all these writers talk about the muse. Like, you can't start writing until the muse arrives. And he's like, the muse arrives every morning at 9 a.m. when I sit at my desk and I start typing. And it's all about like writers write, builders build, musicians play. It's like, so you have to, and the book is incredible because this guy was like, you know, like homeless, living on in a van. And, you know, he had every excuse in the world why he couldn't write or finish his first book. And he basically, you know, got to rock bottom and realized that we are our own worst enemies. And if you can just, you know, break through that little barrier of beginning and just creating a routine of whether what you wrote that day is shit or gold, doesn't matter. You have to do it, sit down every day and do it. And it's like, instead of The Art of War by Lao Tzu, it's the war of art, where it's like, you know, we have to beat this motherfucker demon known as resistance that will come up with it'll even be like where you befriend people who have drama so that their drama will distract you from your work, or you enter into a relationship with someone that is so demanding that it deprives you of time to, you know, and we do that to ourselves subconsciously, where we sometimes will set us up with like, you know, all these obstacles to keep us from doing the one fucking thing that we came here to do. So that's a book that everyone should fucking get.
Yeah, totally. I'll have to read that. I love reading.
I'm gonna give you a copy, because that's the thing. It's like, I've given out like 20 copies already. And if you buy it yourself, like, you may not read it, but if someone gives you the book, you kind of feel guilty. So I'm gonna give you a copy so that when you see
kids, buy your friends my books, they feel guilty and they'll read it.
Yeah, damn straight. I will.
Oh my God, I love that. So let me
Yeah.
ask you this. Do you drink or smoke or do anything when you write? Like, is there any sort of
Yes.
that action going on?
So I like to use different drugs for different purposes. So I like to smoke weed when I'm outlining, when I'm like coming up with big picture stuff. Because when I get high, I'm not like a casual smoker. I don't like to smoke for recreational purposes because I get super paranoid, or I'm also like I go into my head a lot, which is bad for partying, but it's great for writing.
Yeah.
And so I'll go in my office, I'll take a couple hits of like a nice like sativa strain, and I can see the big picture. If you ask me to write something that was structured or like concise, fuck no, never. Well, so when I'm outlining, I'll take a couple hits of the joint and like I'll have this free flow of ideas. And if even if I have like a block or like a structural problem, a plot problem, fucking marijuana just busts right through it because you see
Right?
things from other perspectives and this and that. And then so that's my outlining. And then alcohol for me is great for like the actual writing of it, but you have to be careful for me because too much and you like I fucking can't even hit the keys. I'm like from like all over the place. But like a little bit of booze kind of quiets that inner critic.
Yeah.
It gives you that liquid courage. It's that thing that like when you're at a bar and you see someone and you take a couple drinks and like all of a sudden you have this confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love having some, usually like a gin martini or like a margarita when I'm writing, actually like writing, because it just kind of like lubricates the wheels. But you got to be careful because too much, and then you wake up the next day and you look at what you wrote and it's like a different language.
Yeah. And you
So
feel
I like to modulate between different
yeah.
substances.
Do you listen to music at all to get you in a zone?
Absolutely, yeah. But it's weird. I'll listen to like movie score music.
Okay.
Because it's like if you think about like movies, the music, the score, the compositions are like they're designed to evoke emotion.
Yeah.
Right. Like sometimes you'll just depending on what I'm writing, if I'm writing like a chase scene or like a scary horror scene, then I'll listen to music from like a horror film. And if I'm writing something that's romantic or like epic, so I have all these different soundtracks to movies that I love that like make me feel an emotion that kind of gets me into the zone of that scene or that moment.
I love that.
Lyrics kind of distract me sometimes.
Yeah.
When I'm writing, so I'd like to do like instrumental score music for movies.
I love that. I actually do the same thing. I listen to a lot of Thievery Corporation and but then when I was and it's funny because I mean like kind of like you, like I never wrote a book just from waiting tables for so many years and people talking to me telling me I should. Eventually I was like, okay, I'll write a book. And little did I know how much harder and longer it would ever take. But when I found I was in the writing process, like music played a big role too, because I think like it helps you choose the words. I think for you as well, like from creating a script for a movie, it's kind of also like manifesting the movie itself.
For sure.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's you're kind of watching it play out in your head, but I think even though the writing is probably different style wise for like novels and scripts, at the end of the day you're telling a story.
Yeah.
Whether it's your story or a character's story. And so that's the thing that all humans have in common is like the hero's journey is like we are all the heroes of our own movie, like your life. So if you think of your life as a movie right now, I'm 37, I'm probably like, just about to the act 2 twist of the movie kind of thing. And if you're the hero of your story, then the hero always wins.
I love
and
that.
So I think of myself as like, I'm the hero of this journey. And that helps when I'm writing because then I think about, even if it's a scene, you can break a scene down into, that scene can be a whole movie. Has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so, I don't even know how I got there, but
actually writing
storytelling is just like, I think it's innate. But I love the fact that you never wrote a book before and you just decided one day, I'm going to write a fucking book. And that's the thing. So you have no fear. And fear is the biggest enemy, I think, of people starting.
Well, I mean, I definitely had fear. I mean, like, there's a couple of things. Like, I remember, like, when I was turning 30, I was having my, like, quarter life crisis. And then actually what inspired me to write my books. I was telling people all the things that I was doing, not only to, like, break through the fear of, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life, but also taking time to heal myself. And then when I decided to write the book, going back to, like, I mean, I fucking procrastinated for almost a year. I was at home writing my book, but kept watching TV after this episode. To I literally at one point was like, bitch, I took my fucking TV and left it outside for a Mexican to pick up. And
I love it.
Day, my intention was to get a TV back afterwards, but then I realized like I didn't need it. I was happier, healthier.
Don't need it.
Yeah, more creative. And then eventually, like, what I found with me is that writing, because at the time I'd been writing a blog versus a book was very different, and I was getting very frustrated. So I reached out to my ex-boyfriend. He had been, like you, an actor that was transitioning to writing. He had studied under Bobby Moresco, who wrote Crash $1 Million Baby. So he taught me how to, like, structure and do a story. And then from there, it really gave me kind of, like you said, like just that consistency every day. So at one point I just took the training wheels off and was like, no, this bitch got this shit. And like, was like, you know, getting in my zone, like learning how to find my voice and all that stuff. And it was a beautiful journey in itself. I feel like anybody who has something deep within them, there's a purpose for that passion. Whether if you're meant to put it out there on a big platform or not, there's something that you are meant to learn about yourself and usually heal through that journey. And I think maybe too, that's why some people are afraid to physically sit with whatever that is. You know, for me, I saw all my demons and trauma on paper for a year. I'm like, but the beautiful thing about it is after physically rewriting my experiences, there is a power of, for me, healing and release. But also when you put it out there to the universe, I'm like, you no longer live within me. You're out there, motherfucker, you know?
It's like, healing. Yeah, it's healing. It's cathartic. It's like, you know, you're releasing all this inner demons that we all have. Like, everyone has baggage. And I think that's why, you know, more fucked up people are drawn to the arts, because we're looking for a mechanism to, like, heal ourselves. Especially acting. Like, that's like, you know, people join acting classes more for therapy than they do to learn the craft. But, you know, in the process, it teaches you to open up and to release emotions and to be honest and comfortable with that. And then you can apply that to anything in life. That is like digging deep. A lot of people just, they don't go past a certain level. You know, they stay shallow because they're afraid of what they'll uncover when they go down into like the caverns of your soul.
People are afraid to even have a conversation with their true self.
Terrified, you know what I mean? And that's why, you know, I think especially cannabis is so helpful, because it removes all filters.
100%.
So, like, you know, you see yourself from a true light and not the story you've told yourself your whole life. And I think that's why people get paranoid when they smoke, is because they're like, that's me? That's what I sound like? That's what I look like? Because we're so good at, you know, believing the bullshit. And so, you know, I'm a big fan of, like, you know, using drugs for, like, medicinal and for spiritual purposes and for creative purposes, and not just to fucking, you know, watch a movie and eat a burrito.
Although that is fun every now and then. No, but I completely agree with you. So my second book that I'm working on is strictly on relationships, but I'm exploring all ideas of different relationships. And one of them is like your mental and emotional and spiritual well-being. And I too am a big believer. Like, I never really smoked weed back in the day. I still don't really like, I microdose weed more than I'm considered.
Same.
For me, that's just how I operate. Because if I smoke too much, I'm like too in my head. But like, there's power in it. And that's actually so, like, the program that I just got finished, on the Unfucking Yourself program, I actually suggest in the intro disclaimer, get fucked up off of like weed or alcohol or something to get you out, like whatever is in the driver's seat, to get out so you can get back into it and be open to new ways of thinking and seeing yourself for your truth, but then being able to like plant whatever the seeds are. Because I think, you know, our society's gotten so afraid of like whatever psychedelics, because I think for multiple, I'm not going to even go down that rabbit hole, but the short thing is they want people to be in fear. They want them to be depressed,
Right.
they want them to be sad. So they buy all this other shit versus actually healing it, like, and actually being a happy human being who can think for themselves, you know, like, go
And
live
connecting with the
their
spirit.
life, you know?
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
so let me ask you this. As far as like with what you do for your writing, do you have like a main message that you found is kind of in all three movies? Like, is there kind of like a theme that like you put out there, or is it all different? Do you know
I
what I'm saying?
mean, yeah, I think it's tough because I'm just like at the beginning. I'm like at the the infant stage of this new career. But the first two movies were gangster movies, just because the guy who hired me loved gangster movies. The third movie, the one that I directed, my directorial debut, that was kind of like I was given a really uncommon, amazing situation where there was money for the movie, the budget was there, the location was set, but there was no script, there was no idea, and so I could write anything I fucking wanted, which is terrifying because when you don't have like a structure, then it's like you get almost paralyzed by the options.
Yeah.
And so this one was more, I think, definitely the most personal for me because I could write anything I wanted. So I went down to, we shot it down in Florida. And so when I closed the deal with the investor and with the executive producers, I was like, all right, so we have a budget. I'm writing it, I'm directing it, but we don't know what it is. So I'm going to come down to Florida and just hang out and come up with the story. And then so I go down to Florida and I'm like just hanging out and I'm just seeing all these things and letting them affect me. And I'm like, oh, wow, that guy has an orange Hummer. Put that in the movie. Oh, there's an abandoned barn there. Put that in the movie. Oh, that guy's really weird. Let's put him in. And I started putting all these pieces that were already there. And it just kind of coalesced into the story. And, it's one of those amazing things where it's like, sometimes like you can't control, the artistic thing. You have to kind of let it do its thing and just be comfortable. And you're like, we are a vessel. The inspiration comes from outside and it comes into our bodies and like we're typing it, but you have to be okay with just kind of relinquishing control and letting it do its thing.
I love
and that was a great lesson to learn for me because I'm such a control freak.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't know where this is going to go, but let's just fucking go with the ride and see what happens. And so this most recent film is about like, family. It's about like the family you choose versus the family you're given. It's about like, if you do a bad thing for a good cause, is it really a bad thing? And it's kind of like this Oliver Twist type movie about a guy who, he like takes in orphans and runaways off the street, gives them a home, gives them a place to live, but then like teaches them to be criminals. And they go out in like, Central Florida around the swamps and they knock off drug dealers and they blow up meth labs and they do all these bad things, but for a good reason until, this crazy shit happens. But, I think I'm into like the vigilante thing. I'm into like good people doing bad things for a good reason, like steal from the rich, give to the poor. Like I'm into that right now. So that's kind of what the movie's about.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You shared so much good wealth. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
Do you
you.
want to have any final words of wisdom that you would like to put out there?
Oh, I mean, I think, you're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people because you're a perfect example of like, just like doing it, like shutting up and just doing it and creating content, even though no one's asking you or giving you permission, you give yourself permission. And so if for all the people out there, don't wait for someone to let you do something. Do it for yourself, because there's definitely going to be one person out there who will identify with what you're trying to do. And if there's one person, they will tell another person and another person. And that's kind of like how ideas spread. And so don't wait for permission. Do it yourself.
I love that. I gotta type this down real quick. And then you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I am Jon Carlo. Facebook, same thing. And Twitter, same thing. The movie's called Feral State. We're about to announce our distribution deal very soon, so stay tuned. And thank you, Natallia, for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. And then for everyone who hasn't already been to my site, natalianemes.com, it's got links to my book, my Unfucking Yourself program, and a lot of other goodies. So thank you so much, Jon.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Take care.
Purple bud in my backwoods. If you smoke with me, you'll get high as fuck. Popeyes eating chicken wings with my eyes low. I be fried up. Upgraded, got a